And
good evening. I'm David Smith, and this is our final week in review for 2011. This evening, each one of us, myself, Eric, and Daniel, will be discussing a particular topic from the past year that we consider to have been of significance. Good evening. I'd like to remind our viewers of our Twitter hashtag, WIRTV, and our email address. You can reach David, Daniel, or Eric at weekinreview.tv. Please, we encourage you to send in your comments, concerns, criticisms, or questions, and we'll be happy to address those on the air. Well, this is the final week on our final episode of the year 2011. We're not going to cover any particular news items today, but each one of us has chosen a particular topic that we felt was significant for the past year. And I'll ask Eric to lead off with the topic that he considers to have been most significant during 2011. Eric?
Yeah, I picked Iran. Iran. We're already basically in a Cold War with Iran, and it's obviously going to be in the news yet next year whether it's going to become a hot war or if they're going to get the atomic bomb. As we're speaking right now, we know they're conducting military naval maneuvers to see if they can shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which would shut off the oil supply to Europe.
And they've threatened to do that if we get our those provisions in the national authorization for the defense passed.
Yeah.
Those are two of the provisions, is attacking the Central Bank of Iran and preventing their export of oil.
Yeah, they're going to shut down the oil, and as we know, they've already attacked the British embassy. Actually, they let students attack it.
Yeah.
They attacked it. That's in the 19th century. That was considered an act of war when you sent the ambassador home.
That's true, and they've called home. The British have called home their ambassador, and his ambassador was expelled from England.
Yeah.
So that's.
So I guess the West is already in a Cold War with them, but we don't acknowledge it. The Iranians have already said that when they that drone that either they brought down or somebody sabotaged in ours or it just malfunctioned, they said they considered that an act of war, and our president, Obama, instead of either hitting the self-destruct button on it or trying to recover the drone, just let them have it. This is absurd.
well, maybe it has something to do with the $11 billion worth of military training and equipment we're giving Iraq. I remember couple episodes back, we discussed that if once we leave Iraq, it leaves it open for Iran to take it over. Why are we supplying military arms and training to someone who we're pretty sure is going to be taken over?
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's
No,
time for us to confront Iran. It's time for us to humiliate them. The negotiations have failed.
That $11 billion gives us an excuse to go back in to Iraq or to invade and use it as a base to invade Iran. Because we have a aircraft carrier, the George H.W. Bush, up in the Mediterranean, off the coast of Syria, and the Russians have parked one of their aircraft carriers, the Admiral Konotsalov, I think, or some. I may have mispronounced the last name.
Yeah.
But it's one of their aircraft carrier groups is parked, and so we're eyeballing each other and waiting to see what Iran is going to do. But the Russians have definitely warned us off from any sort of attack. And of course, I mentioned the story a couple of episodes back about Hezbollah finding out about all of our CIA agents. They know where they're at, where they're living. They've infiltrated our entire spy network.
So they've got our knock list, huh?
Yeah, they know exactly who our operatives are and what we're doing up there. And of course, Hezbollah is the proxy for Iran in that part of the Middle East.
Yeah, and as we covered a couple of episodes back about the declining birth rate in Iran, the mullahs might think this is their last opportunity.
That's true. And they do have, I would encourage everyone to look up the Imam Mahdi online and do some research on this particular doctrine, which both the Shias and the Sunnis espouse, but they have a different opinion as to how it's supposed to come about. Iran, being principally a Shia country, believes that they need to bring about World War III, which will cause the Imam Mahdi to reappear and establish the worldwide caliphate of Islam. So they have some very strange doctrines that are also compelling them. And
oh yeah, they're definitely an apocalyptic culture.
There's a good site called A Time to Betray, which is the title of a book written by a former member of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard who was a double agent. He was an agent of ours who was in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard for many years. And he finally said, there's no more time to wait. If we're going to strike, we need to do it because they're preparing to initiate this military confrontation with the West in order to bring about the return of the Imam Mahdi.
Yeah, this is, as we remember when Obama was running for president, practically the Obama doctrine was of negotiations with Iran, open negotiations. Well, this has clearly failed, and we're at war with Iran, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. They do.
Well, I think
and it's time.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, it's just a matter if it's going to become hot next year if they get an atomic bomb, because I clearly think, like you said, they're an apocalyptic culture, and as we went over their declining birth rate, they're not even going to be a power in the area within 30 or 40 years. They clearly think this is their last chance.
I agree with you. I think you're right. Because the destruction of the missiles last year and this year, as I've thought about it, I don't think that was much damage to the Iranian military. I think they allowed those things to be destroyed to find out where we had infiltrated their security system.
So it's just a fancy mole hunt.
Yes, it's sending us on a mole. It's sending them. They're finding out where our moles are, because they even told us after the last one, all of our atomic and nuclear facilities are deep underground and are safe. There's no way you can reach them.
Well, that is similar to what we did a long time ago whenever we were rooting out all the Russian spies during the beginning of the Cold War. Sounds like they're doing something similar.
Well, they're getting their technology from China and from Russia and from Korea. So they don't need those old missiles.
Right.
You know, they have new missiles that will reach Israel easily and probably even reach Europe, which is a real threat. You know, it's not just going to be a Middle East war. I think they're going to not only send missiles off to Europe, but if they do have sleeper cells here in America, that those will be activated as well.
Yeah. Well, the big difference between Iran and the old Soviet Union is the Soviet Union, despite its weird ideology, was a rational nation. These mullahs are not rational.
Oh no, they're willing to allow 15 million of their own citizens to die, and Ahmadinejad has said this. He is more than willing to allow 15 million of his citizens, which is their estimate of loss in the nuclear exchange.
Mm-hmm.
He's willing to allow them to die in order to bring this return of the Imam Mahdi. So you're not dealing with a rational government at all. You're dealing with a government that's motivated by religion and mysticism. And its foreign policy is apocalyptic. It is not rational.
Yeah.
That's why Obama, it was laughable when he said, we're going to engage in diplomatic negotiation. How do you negotiate with someone, a government like this?
Well, you don't. It's time to acknowledge the failure. If he wanted to try it for a year or 2 years, but now it's time to give up the nonsense.
Well, the problem
That's why I think it's ridiculous when I see these talking heads on TV for the Democratic Party saying that we can't criticize Obama's foreign policy. His foreign policy has been a disaster. We're in a Cold War.
Why can we not criticize his foreign policy? What's their justification for that?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
I guess because he dropped a few missiles on Osama and Anwar al-Awlaki, who I won't go into al-Awlaki, but I think he should have been tried in absentia or something before they dropped a missile on him.
Yeah. Well, that's just absurd. That's a ridiculous statement. Which,
he is so strong on foreign policy, and this is a disaster. We're on the brink of war with a nation that's not rational, it's apocalyptic, and also thinks their time is running out.
I think you're right, Eric, that this war has gone hot, actually. It just isn't being reported as such. You know, the attacks on the missiles this year, those were ours. They know that we and the Israelis went in and they allowed us to do it. And they haven't made a big deal about it. They're going to be very patient, and they're going to attack in their own time. But I think sometime in the coming year, we're going to be drawn into certainly a ground war, and probably a limited nuclear war. But,
I would say sometime around Easter. It seems they like to attack on Christian religious holidays, would be my guess.
Well, they're killing, they're blowing up Christians in their churches, again, in various Muslim-dominated countries, which they wouldn't be doing if they didn't think that someone would come to their aid, or that they had the backing of some major Islamic power.
Yeah.
Which, most of these are done by organizations that are Shia in their background.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to watch for the new year, and I'm sure it's going to be in the headlines awfully soon. So yeah, everyone seems to be talking about that we're just waiting, because I've noticed many commentators think the war has already started. It's just very limited at the present time.
And Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama better recognize that negotiations and these sanctions are not going to work.
No, well, they're treating them as if they're a Western democracy, as if they're based on a Western rational intellectual tradition, and they're not.
Yeah.
And we're not going to make them. We've attempted to make them that, and it just isn't going to happen.
No, this is more like Hitler during World War II. This is his last chance. I don't know when they think they have to get the war started. I'm sure they're going to wait till they get a nuclear weapon, which, as far as I know, they may be days away from.
Yeah, well, I've learned when the media tells us it could be a year from now, they've probably already, or are very close, like you said, within days or weeks of doing it. You know,
Yeah, I
otherwise,
think
they
the
wouldn't be
test
they wouldn't be out in the Strait of Hormuz practicing
No.
openly practicing sea surface drills for closing the strait. You know,
No, if they didn't think they had some Trump to stop to at least intimidate us, and
yeah.
they'll probably test that. I don't know if they're going to test their own nuclear weapon out in the desert or test it on Tel Aviv. I mean, they're so irrational. You just have no idea what they're going to do.
That's true. So, well, that's
but clearly, yeah, they can't be dealt with as a country that has self-interest.
Well, no, they're willing to lose a significant number of our citizens. We're not willing to lose one.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of worries me. I'm afraid that Obama is the type that he'll take 2 or 3, maybe half a dozen nuclear hits before he launches.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't have confidence in him being willing to respond quickly.
No. And then we have the other third party there of Israel, and Netanyahu, who's not willing to take any hits.
Yeah, no, Israel has promised that if they feel threatened, they will unleash the Samson option, which is total destruction of their neighbors. They will turn that part of the Middle East into a sea of glass, and that will be the end of it.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, we could be on the verge of World War III, and our press has just dropped the ball again.
Well, what kind of events have led us to where we are now? What's happened give me a quick, I guess, a timeline view of what's happened over the 2011 with Iran that's led us to where we are now.
Well, Iran drove out, they just simply said that they're not going to allow the IAEA to investigate them any longer, and they're standing by the fact that they are using nuclear development for energy in their own country, and they've argued that they have the right to do so.
So the IAEA
is the UN oversight body for
nuclear.
Yeah, for nuclear weapons and nuclear power.
Okay.
Which, of course, the UN is just a joke. So Iran's not taking them seriously.
It shows again that UN is not going to prevent any wars, that it's, if anything, worse than the League of Nations.
So they went in and with the agreement of all the nations that participate in the UN, the IAEA goes in and monitors nuclear activities.
And
Iran's basically kicked them out and said,
because they're the constant reports. It's constant. Every time they go in, they come back with the same report. Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon, or they're not using what we've been able to investigate for military purposes. It's not being militarized. It's all for civil, peaceful use, energy production. Of course, we don't really know where all of Iran's nuclear facilities are.
No.
Because they're importing much more uranium, or we can find much more, than is accountable for their civilian program. So we know that they're using some of it for a military application.
Is that reported from IAEA, or is that
yes.
from our moles that are telling us?
It's a combination of the IAEA. It's also from various Western intelligence agencies, principally Mossad, the Israeli.
Yeah, Mossad probably is the best intelligence network in the world right now.
So they're not being as open as we would like them to be?
They're not being open at all.
Okay.
And of course, Iran is resistant.
It's our country. We can do what we want.
Which is what we say.
Right. That's
and
what I'm
Israel is not required to account for their almost 600 nuclear weapons, which is what we estimate they have. They're never required to account for theirs. But Iran says, we're not doing this. If you don't play fairly and equally across the board, all the nations that have them have to declare them, and that includes Israel. We are not going to give Israel a pass on this. They just don't get one. And so that's a real problem, because how do you argue against the moral rightness?
Once you get a nuclear weapon, you get left alone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so until they actually get the weapon, everybody just harasses them about and you have to be open about it. We have to know exactly what's happening. And then once they have the weapon, they aren't harassed anymore?
Oh yeah, you have to leave them alone because they'll use it. They'll start, because that's. But then we have Leon Panetta, the Secretary of Defense, out there, crying at the top of his lungs, "We are not going to ever allow Iran to have nuclear weapons." Well, how many times have we heard that mantra since the Clinton administration?
Right.
That's our constant, repetitious response to everything, but we never ever really do anything about it because we don't know if they have either developed their own nuclear warhead or they have some that they have obtained from Korea.
Okay, so our main concern is the fact that they do have, if they do get the weapon, we know based on their religion, based on that's their driving force for their entire country, that they would actually use it. Unlike U.S. and Israel and, well, U.S. nowadays.
Well, probably Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv will probably be the first target, yeah.
Okay. And that's really what we're concerned about is the fact that once they do have it, we're like 75% sure that they're going to use it.
Yeah.
Okay. And
well, also then, yeah, they can fund terrorism and do anything they want without any worries of invasion.
Okay. And so what we're working, the only measures that we have is to try to pull openness and get them to talk about it and find out about it through various means like the IAEA and various other things to try to get them to tell us whether they've actually got the weapon or not.
Yeah.
And find out where they are with it.
Well, we have plenty of options. We just don't use them. We could blockade the whole country.
Okay.
Which is China and Russia will oppose that because they need the oil. That's how Iran is paying for this.
So Iran is supplying their
they supply
oil supply to China,
and they supply China with oil.
Mm-hmm.
China refines the oil into gasoline. They keep a portion of it, 40%, as payment for the service of refining the oil into gas. 60% goes back to Iran for their own use or for sale.
Okay.
But they just
and we know from history this is a dangerous practice, this appeasement of trying to delay the war because they're getting stronger. This is like, I hate to bring up Neville Chamberlain because I think he was a good man, basically, but by preventing the war when Germany invaded Czechoslovakia, you've had to fight a far more costly war a couple of years later.
Well, that's the problem. We have such a large percentage of Americans unwilling to allow the use of military force against Iran because most people are suspicious that they do indeed already have a nuclear weapon, mm-hmm. or that there will be severe reprisals here in the United States from sleeper cells, terrorist cells. So Iran is something to watch because, as Eric said, it's definitely going to be a primary event and news item in the coming year, as it is here at the end of this year. So,
okay.
Why don't we transition over to Daniel? Daniel, what is your topic? What do you think was the most important or significant event of last year?
Well, as far as technology and security goes, because that seems to be taking a more and more frontal role in the world, especially with the tying into Iran, the Stuxnet virus, where it shut down some of their nuclear facilities or facility. It all ties into the security and everything, and what my main topic is basically anonymous. They have, I wanted to give everybody a quick description of exactly what they are and what they do. What they are, and here, there you go. What they are is a loosely collected group of people, technology people, smart people, that have access to data or know how to access the data and collects that and provides that information online. We are in the information age, And basically, if you have control of the information, or any information, it doesn't matter, then you have power in the information age. And what Anonymous is mainly focused on is human rights, information collection, and basically preventing the people who control the flow of information from using it against us. For example, one of the events that occurred this year was the BART system in San Francisco. During basically the BART company, they had one of their guards shoot a homeless guy, and as a result, they were going to be protested. Now, Anonymous, what they seem to be doing is a lot of protest support, and in this case, during the protesting, BART was planning on shutting down their repeater towers. Now, what that means is when you go into the BART station, most of the time you're going down underground or in a highly confined area where the cell phone towers, it's really hard to get the signal down there. So what the technology's come up with is what's called a repeater. And this repeater, they put them in and allow the facility, the people inside, to have a cell phone signal so they can get out and call and share data and everything.
Or if someone has a heart attack or a medical emergency underground, they can use their cell phone to get medical attention. Or call 911, call the police, the BART police.
Right. And what BART said what BART did was shut down these repeaters, which basically eliminates cell phone connectivity when you're down in the system. And what that means is no one was able to call for help. If anything happened, if there was an accident or something like that, no one would be notified, no one would get help until somebody ran out of the system. And
which, in an area, I've lived in San Francisco, in an area that is prone to earthquakes, this is not a very good idea.
Exactly.
I would hate to have been underground without the ability to use my cell phone.
So the general response of Anonymous, as I said, a loosely collective group of people on the internet, they attacked the BART website and released a ton of information related to them, basically in retaliation for their inhumane act of shutting down, BART's inhumane act of shutting down the cell phone towers. There have been many responses just like this.
So essentially you're saying Anonymous is viewing the exchange of information of any kind, no matter what, as a fundamental human right.
Yes, exactly.
I have a question about Anonymous. I remember they had some problems with one of the Mexican drug cartels a few months back. What happened with that?
I'm afraid I don't know much about that one, though. Do you?
Yeah, well,
have some additional information?
I heard that one of the drug cartel, of course, just grabbed one of their members and beat the hell out of him, and that was the end of it.
Well, he was probably was he passing information over the internet?
Well, no, the Anonymous threatened to, like you said, release all the information of all the leaders of this drug cartel. I think it was the Zatex, is it?
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, they threatened to release the addresses and all the information of the leaders of this cartel.
How did they obtain the information? Did they hack into a government database, or did they hack into Zeta's database?
Know.
That's interesting.
But anyway, the Zatex just grabbed a couple of these guys in the masks, of course, and just beat the hell out of them and told them if you release the information, you're not going to get released next time.
Well, that's interesting because it's the way Anonymous is working is they have multiple, since it's a loose collection of people with access to this information, they have all kinds of various targets, and there is no true leader of the group. So some people have a direction one way, and others in the group have a direction in a different way. And one example of this is one of the main, probably most visible things that happen physically is the fact that Anonymous members protest and basically have a war on Scientology. So everywhere there's a Scientology facility, they're out picketing and protesting that group.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, I mean, when you do this, of course, you pick up enemies real quick.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
this is the this also. I don't know if all of you have been following it, but the court-martial of PFC Bradley Manning,
Yeah.
the pre-trial hearing, Article 32 hearing, occurred last week, and he is being, even despite the fact that the Department of State and the Department of Justice did an investigation and determined that none of the information that was supposedly released and that he was charged with releasing has led to anyone's harm. No one's been harmed by it. We haven't lost any of our agents or anything. It's just an embarrassment to the United States. And it's the government trying to conceal what it's doing.
Now, this
It
is
doesn't want the people to know because we will be opposed to what. And I think, for that extent, Anonymous does a service in making sure that people understand we have a right. We pay for it.
Mhm.
This information is not something that we don't. We, the taxpayers, pay for it. We own it. And the idea that this security state is apart from they get to rob us to do these clandestine activities.
Mhm.
And so this type of thing threatens the oligarchy that has essentially developed this police state, this military, industrial, pharmaceutical, financial complex by which they have attempted to suppress us.
Mhm.
And they don't want people knowing about it.
Well, it's going to be interesting. This is another topic I think we're all going to be watching in the new year. Anonymous is making some pretty heavy enemies, so we'll see how they stand up to it.
Well, I'm wondering how they're going to use the NDAA, the Indefinite Detention Clause, because they have the FEMA concentration camps. Some of them are up and running already. You can check that online. And they're already up and running. And they're ready to receive many hundreds of thousands of people at these various refurbished military bases and complexes that we have paid for with our tax dollars.
Yeah, you did mention they were also testing this live with volunteer prisoners.
Yes.
To go in.
Well, if you, the people who built them, who refurbished them, they were actual prisoners. And they told them, look, if you go work on this camp on developing it, we will parole you early.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't ever tell anyone about it. Otherwise, you're going to be an inmate real fast again, and you'll never get out. But that's how they had a lot of people work off portions of their sentence, is by refurbishing the camps. And so they already have experienced, because they would live at the camp while they were working on it. So they've already experienced what it's like. And I suppose that a few of them have clandestinely leaked some of the information.
Right.
But it's so little and so sporadically that no one can really be traced for it.
Well, that's...
And the Obama administration was supposed to be known for its transparency, huh?
Yes, yes.
Well, there goes that promise.
Yeah, that promise went out the window.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was on board with whenever he became president. But
well, everyone was after the Bush administration, but it's like this is even worse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I hear he's even re-signed all the contracts with Halliburton that all the Democrats were complaining about.
Yeah. Because this is finally
all the contracts.
What people need to realize is there are not two parties. There's the oligarchic party, which presents itself with two faces. So it gives us the illusion that we have choice, and we don't. We elect whom they want us. The two candidates are perfectly acceptable to either one of them, to the oligarchy. It doesn't matter which, because as you notice, nothing ever changes.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing ever changes. It remains the same. From administration to administration, ever since the death of John F. Kennedy, it has been the same.
Yeah.
We have,
Oh, Well, I think that, like I said, we talked about Iran and now Anonymous. It seems like there's going to be some shocks to the system next year that are. We'll see how the system takes it, how it responds.
That kind of leads into my topic. I want to talk about the European debt crisis, because the crisis is actually our crisis. The president has spent several weeks over in Europe trying to help them, earlier in the year, trying to help them solve their debt problem, because they need, apparently, to delay it reaching the shores of the United States, because it's on its way over here. You know, we keep bailing them out. That $17 trillion bailout from the Federal Reserve was our tax dollars going to bail out European banks.
And yeah, money we borrowed from somebody else.
Yeah, some of that we borrowed from, future generations, and that we supposedly have sold to the Chinese and other countries as sovereign debt. But that whole thing is about leveling us as a nation so that we become like France and Italy. Germany, now, even the French don't want to be France right now. So I don't know why we would want to be France. But that is the Obama administration's. There's no attempt to stave off the employment crisis here. There's no real attempt at working at solving our financial crisis. Because the idea is to level us out so that we have this one gigantic European Union from the borders of Western Europe all the way to America.
Yeah, we're seeing the collapse of the welfare state.
Yeah.
Because even though it doesn't seem we live off of our children, we all do in our retirement. We just live off of other people's children now, and no one's having them.
Yeah, we've talked about that real problem, the consequences of killing off your own civilization by not birthing the successors to yourselves, to ourselves. We haven't done that. Now it's caught up with us.
Yeah, the human race is always just one generation away from extinction.
So we're, but that was the most concern, because again, they've pumped all kinds of money into Italy and into Greece, and it isn't helping. It's not staving off the crisis. Germany and France are attempting to reorganize the European Union. Britain's pulling out of the Union, and I just don't see how they're going to come out of this except if we have a very large war. War is always the last resort to solve economic problems. So I think they're trying to orchestrate this war in the Middle East in order to facilitate the economic reorganization that they're seeking. So it's going to wind up costing us a great deal. Because there simply isn't, they're not even addressing the issue of the quadrillion, the 40 quadrillion dollars, which is a number no one can imagine, and it's greater than the resource, the whole GDP of the whole world we have in these derivatives. We can never, ever pay this back. It's simply impossible to do.
Well, that's the big question. Who exactly are we paying it back to? And can we simply default, and what's the results of that?
It's an interesting question because, and this, you and I have talked about this, Daniel, from time to time, about the possibility that there is some sort of breakaway civilization that we are unaware of. And all this money, because we're not getting the high degree of hyperinflation that we ought to have when all this money that has been loaned out re-enters the economy of the world. We're just not seeing it. So where is it going?
Well, we were talking about this earlier again, and one of my theories that I presented was the fact that if the money was being dumped onto the system, and let's say they were creating a breakaway society, or basically they were spending it, that would mean the money is in the system. But since we're not having any hyperinflation, even if they were spending it, There would be hyperinflation because all this money would be in the system. But then, what would you have? What's the result of just deleting the cash? Just throwing it away, burning it. Well, you've got a huge amount of the society in debt to you.
Well, the debt is artificial.
Exactly.
If you pushed a button and reset everything to 0 tomorrow, and no one had any debt, credit card, no education debt, no house debt, nothing, and we just went back to, okay, you have to pay property tax.
But then the problem there is no one has power over the people. The people that are orchestrating all of this, they would have no power over the people.
Yes,
debt's giving them power.
We're debt slaves. That's
exactly.
Because that's the whole secret, and people need to go and Google Webster Tarpley and watch a few of his videos on the Federal Reserve and how the system works and what this debt is all about. And you begin to understand that we are perpetually enslaved by this because there's never, ever enough money in circulation to repay the debt, because it's what you borrowed plus interest. So there's never enough money because the interest is artificial, but you're paying back with real money.
Right.
So if there's anyone out there who's actually worried about the Mayan calendar not going on after December 21st, I think we've given you real stuff to worry about now.
Yeah. Well, this problem. I have followed this for a year, and it's really become annoying to me. Over the past couple of months, all I see people talking about, other than the Mayan calendar nonsense, is gay marriage. Now, if we have, and I'm not saying that gay people should not have all the civil rights that everyone else has, but right now we have really important issues to deal with. And if you can get married and have no money, and you're enslaved, I don't think getting married really matters at this point. With the terrible things that are going on, but this is how they divide and conquer us. They keep us fixated on these moral issues. And this political identity crisis, this identity politics that we get involved in, rather than politics of principle. We don't have that anymore. And we ought to have politics of principle, not politics of identity.
Yeah, we have huge structural problems that are going to have to be dealt with soon.
Yeah. Well, the structure is just collapsing under us, and we either need to get people who are willing to tell us, look, we're going to have to bite the bullet and do these following things. It's going to be very hard on the current generation that's, baby boomers, or shortly, even those right after, because we've got to save your children and grandchildren, because there is no future for them.
Well,
if we continue what we're doing.
If something dramatic does happen, I can definitely see the younger generation taking over and basically saying, no, we don't owe any money. You guys did it. We don't owe it. We're zero. And see what the powers that be do with that information.
Well, that would need a worldwide revolution. I mean, you're calling for something very dramatic in every country. And
well, I think that would be like the fall of Rome. You'd have some new Attila the Hun and Gaiseric the Vandal, and
we'd wind up with it'd be Mad Max all over the world for probably close to a century.
Well,
worldwide Somalia.
I did want to see a remake of that, but not necessarily in real life.
Didn't want to participate in it, huh?
No.
Okay. Well, that's an issue we need to be looking at, and everyone needs to be examining this to determine what we need to do.
Yes.
Because we absolutely cannot, and will not. Not only can we cannot, we will not be able to continue. The system will implode on itself. So we need to be aware of what's going on so that we can make some decisions about what we as individuals and maybe as communities need to be doing about that.
Well, again, I would like to know who do we owe the money to? And again, what would happen if we default on it? If the world defaults on everything it owes, and we just set everything to zero?
Well, go
Yeah,
find out who.
your money's worthless at that point.
Go find. You'd have to create a whole new society, which would localize the economy. We would have. You would have an economy here in Springfield. I would have. There would be a different economy in Fayetteville. Eric would probably have an economy in a part of San Diego because it's so large. And they would start bartering with other communities and so on. But we would be back.
Right. It would
in
come
Middle
back
Ages.
down to what the true value of money is, which is labor.
Yeah.
You know, physical human labor is the only
we would
value
go back
in the world.
to money would be a receipt drawn on the goods in the state storehouse, which is what money originally was.
Right,
you
which
worked
is,
and you were given a chit at the end of the day, a clay tablet that says this worker is entitled to 3 quarts of beer and 2 sacks of barley.
right, and if you break those down, all that is just labor that's that's put into building a product which has value.
Yeah, that's the
And
goods,
it's the labor.
goods and services of the state is
Yes.
what is of real value.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, yeah. The question is what institutions would actually retain some moral authority?
Right.
Because when Rome fell, I mean, everybody had the Catholic Church and the Western Empire to turn to.
Yeah, that is the question. What is our who's going to be there to fill the place of authority? Because that really depends on where everyone. Do we retain the technology when everything collapses? Do we retain some of our political structure, cultural structure? If we don't, everything's up for grabs. Then you have the Mad Max scenario.
Right.
Yeah.
Because at that point, might makes right. Whoever's the strongest gets the government. Why don't we transition Eric into Oswald Spengler? I think this is a good spot. I think he sort of addressed this.
I think this is the perfect spot. Yeah,
he addressed this. Why don't you
history.
Give us an idea? Oswald Spengler, author of Decline of the West, a cultural and historical philosopher.
Born on 29th of May, 1880, and his father was a post office employee. He was a mining engineer, post office employee. And Spengler went to several extremely good universities in Germany, Munich and Berlin. But he failed his doctor's thesis on Heraclides, which will become interesting in a minute because he didn't have enough references. Heraclides, of course, is the...
That's common today, is it not?
Yeah.
Being told, you have to redo this paper because there aren't enough references.
Yeah. Yeah, no one ever does that today. But anyways, yeah, and Heraclides was a great, of course, pre-Socratic philosopher of change. So he became a high school teacher, and then when the Agadir crisis, which I won't go into, but anybody interested can look it up, it's a prelude to World War I, he resigned and decided to write his book, Decline of the West, which he finished right before World War I, but due to the war, of course, he couldn't get a publisher. But after the war, it was published. Spengler went through genuine poverty during World War I. He had almost no money, nothing. But it became a big hit in the 1920s. And then he was the only right-wing intellectual in Germany that was anti-Nazi during the build-up of the Nazi Party, and he died in 1936 at the age of 56. And now I'll talk briefly about Decline of the West, which is a philosophy of history, which he posits a cyclical theory of civilizations or cultures. I prefer cultures that come and go. He says when a few individuals, isolated individuals, get a new perspective, it starts a new culture if it catches on, of course. And he tracks 6 of these in Decline of the West. The last one being the Faustian culture, which is us, the Western civilization. And he goes through the various stages, creative stages, and then finally they crystallize. And he says there's no really creative cultural thought, but mostly just military power at that last stage. And the last stage can last 200 to 400 years, or even longer if no one really kicks it over. He uses ancient Egypt as an example of a crystallized culture that wasn't making any progress, that just hung around for a lot longer than it should have.
What do you think his opinion would have been of? Because we sort of fit into that. We can see parallels. However, we have had such an extreme technological development, such creativity. How do you think he would, had he lived long enough to see it? How do you think he would have fit that into?
I think that would have been very interesting. Is if Spengler, I think he probably, like I'll say personally, Spengler was a great inspiration to me and caused me to study philosophy. I think he would have seen the beginnings of a new culture here, a new feeling towards the world, because he clearly thought that the West was already in the crystallized stage where military power and political and military power, that was all that was left to it.
So those of us who are advocating, extending human life into outer space and developing the technologies we have as a new cultural form, a new,
yeah,
we would be considered Spenglerians even if we don't hold his necessarily pessimistic views of.
Yeah. With the pessimism, there also comes optimism, which I guess is a good balance for today, because we've given people plenty of things to be pessimistic about. But with Spengler, every beginning with every end, there is a new beginning. Mm-hmm. Because once the old perspective is played out, some people finally come up with a new perspective. And I'm actually going to congratulate all of us here. I think we're some of the isolated individuals that are starting that right now. And of course, my book, I'm going to start writing my next installment, Prologue to Metaphysics. I'm going to try and back that up for the people who are interested. They can get in contact with the show or Daniel. And I'll try and get the first installment typed up and ready early next year.
So would you say that in Spengler's view of this cycle, as I understand it, it went from sort of mythology to religion to a poetic phase to a rational phase where you just think everything to death. And then you wind up in the decline, which begins. There's no longer any real power to keep the civilization going. It's just kind of burning on fumes as it goes down. But in that process, do we return back to the mythological? Do we try to go back and, for example, in our own situation here in the West, it seems like we know we're on the decline, but we're trying to go back and certain segments are trying to hold on to religion or go back to mythology and hold on to it even though they know we're going down.
We will go back to a new mythology. I mean, he said that Faustian mythology was the mythology of the West. He didn't say it, but I'll say it. I think it's best exemplified in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein novel of somebody who creates a power, and they really don't know what they're doing. If you read Marlowe's Faustus or Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, they really don't have any idea what they're going to do with this power once they bring it forth, and then this power destroys them. And that's pretty much what we've done in the West. We've unleashed huge technological energies we really don't know what to do with yet. So I think, we're going to have a new feeling, a new feeling of how to use our technology, and this is going to bring about a new culture. And we are at a similar stage, like he said, that the Greece of Plato and Aristotle is similar to the Germany of Kant and Hegel. And like you said, where it was think to death. And right after, of course, Kant and Plato, soon after, rose existentialism, which was a very pessimistic philosophy. Alienation sets in. And in the ancient world, we can see the parallel as the Gnostics took over.
So that was sort of, we've sort of been in the decline. Would you say the beginning was Voltaire, and that really began our decline down? We entered that last phase that Spengler.
That really began the decline down. That begins the last phase where we make enormous technical progress, but the real feeling, it's really a culture that people are not sure if they want to live in anymore.
We no longer have the spiritual emotional
the
aspects.
spirituality is gone. Yeah.
We don't.
And of course, the most obvious example of that is declining birth rates. We know after Rome fell, Italy was almost depopulated. The birth rates in Western Europe are ridiculous, to say the least.
So you would agree that probably the rise recently of the neo-Gnostics in the last 50 years kind of reflect don't birth another generation for this.
Yeah. Another generation has found nothing in our culture to keep them going. We're fallen into nihilism.
The more we know, that's an even greater argument for the need to develop our technology quickly and carry it as far as it will go and get ourselves onto other planets and begin expanding our culture and our finding new causes to keep the civilization developing into a new form.
Yeah, I think that we're going to have the rise of a new culture, and we're actually seeing the beginnings of the feeling right now. I mean, there's not too many. Like I said, it's isolated individuals like you, me, and Daniel, and a few others. But, yeah, it's beginning to happen, or I think it is, and I'm going to try and back that up in my writings later on. But I think that Spengler is good reading right now. Like I said, he's usually got the tag of being a pessimist, but we got to remember that with every end, there's a new beginning.
Well, the new beginning may actually lead me into the author I'm going to recommend for next week. Now he's not dead yet, so he's 57, but he's written several influential books, basically almost entirely based on openness and based entirely in technology, how society as a whole is sharing more information. And after reading his books, I'm actually starting to develop an optimism for humanity's future. I would recommend. His name is Jeff Jarvis.
Jeff Jarvis, okay. We will hear about him next week, and I will do some research on him. Is that Jarvis with a J?
Yep, Jarvis.
Okay. Yeah, and I would encourage everybody out there to look a little more into Spengler. I mean, I'm not saying that everything he said was right, but he had a rare feeling for history and culture. I mean, it wasn't just, like they say, the paced history. It wasn't just dates and events. He tried to get to the feeling of the people.
He had a significant influence on Arnold Toynbee. And also on Joseph Campbell, the creative mythologist. He's had a significant influence on a number of people who are important to the latter half of the century, the 20th century, and certainly the first decade of the 21st century. So I would agree with Eric. People should read him, become familiar with his ideas, because he did have a significant influence on academia. I'd like to know, Eric, what do you think it was a good idea for Spengler to decline the professor of philosophy position at Göttingen University? I know he did because he wanted to write, but do you think it would his influence have been greater if he had actually taken the chair, or would it have stymied his own expression and creativity?
I think Spengler was one of those people that Schopenhauer said that no real advances in philosophy can come through academia. I think Spengler is another person that proves that point.
That's true. I would agree with that. Well, thank you for familiarizing us with Oswald Spengler. Again, Decline of the West, generally found in 2 volumes. You can probably locate it on Barnes & Noble or Amazon.
Aid Books.
Aid Books.
And it's very affordable. Extremely affordable. I won't give you prices, but it's very affordable. This book is not going to break you in any way.
Because it will help a lot of people understand at least Spengler's theory, our culture seems to fall into his pattern. As Eric said, not everything he said is probably correct, but certainly his general idea was significant and finds relevance in today. Well, that's our show, our last show for the year 2011. Our hashtag WIRTV, our email, David, Eric, or Daniel at weekinreview.tv. Please send us your comments, observations, criticisms, or questions. We'll be happy to address them on the air. And we wish all of our viewers a very happy and prosperous New Year 2012. We might want to rethink this.